Hi, my name is Lexi Goodall, and this is my speech on how stress affects your body. Since we're not in class and I can't ask you guys to raise your hand or anything, I want you to think about these couple questions. So, have you ever experienced stress? It could be a yes or no, or it could be a specific time. My next question is, have you ever experienced a physical or mental symptom from stress? So, stress affects every aspect of our body, physically, mentally, and biologically. We know that stress affects us physically because everybody has experienced stress before or every day, and we can know this because physically we can see it and we can feel it. According to the 2014 Brain Behavioral Research by Barry S. Oken, there are two kinds of stressors, internal and external. External stressors are things such as the weather, relationships, or finances. Internal stressors are things such as infections, diseases, or disorders, or even high or low blood pressure and sugar. These stressors then give us physical symptoms. These physical symptoms a lot of people know about or experience are headaches, heartburn, stomach aches, muscle aches, and insomnia. But we also know that stress can cause us to have erectile dysfunction, a low sex drive, and even cause us to have missed periods. According to the 2020 Healthline, The Effects of Stress on Your Body by Ann Pettirangelo, the CNS is in charge of your fight or fright response and tells the adrenal glands to release the stress hormones and cortisol. It's a lot of words, it's a lot of science. So what this means is your CNS, or your central nervous system, is your brain and your spinal cord. And they send a signal to your respiratory and your cardiovascular, where your heart and your lungs to increase. So your heart rate and your breathing increases, and this gives you strength to fight these stressors. But the CNS also sends a hormone to your liver to increase your blood sugar production to give you the energy to fight these stressors. This can cause you to have serious health issues like developing type 2 diabetes, having a heart attack, or even a seizure. But it also can cause pre-existing symptoms for other things to worsen. This can also cause chronic stress. Chronic stress is when a stressor goes on for too long and intensifies. We know that stress affects you physically, but we also know stress affects you mentally. When I say mentally, I don't mean just like, disorders, but I also mean how it actually alters our brain. So stress can cause our mental health to waver. What I mean by this is stress can actually cause us to develop anxiety and depression, but it also increases our risk to developing things such as a sleeping disorder, an eating disorder, or even PTSD. We can combat this by having a positive self-efficiency. Self-efficiency is a person's belief in a way that they conduct a behavior. Research conducted by Pia Schoenfield in 2015 titled The Effects of Daily Stress on the Positive and Negative Mental Health. Mediation through self-efficiency suggests that when people had self-efficiency, they had a positive resistance to stress and fewer mental health disorders. We also know that stress can alter our brain. So stress causes us to have an overproduction of myelin-producing cells, and we know in our brain we have axons and neurons. And these axons are covered by a protective covering called the myelin sheath, as seen in the picture. And these myelin sheaths are white matter, because we have white and gray matter in our brain. And this white matter helps conduct electrical signals through our brain so that we can communicate. And this gray matter is the axon and neuron cells. In the 2020 article, The Impact of Stress on a Cellular Level by Health One states that stress can overproduce myelin, bringing permanent change to the brain, cause abnormalities. So what this means is, with the overproduction, it causes an imbalance of the white and gray matter, and it causes our brain not to function properly. We also know that stress can cause our mental health to deteriorate, because when we stress, we produce cortisol, and when we produce cortisol too fast, our body has nothing to do with it. So this, in turn, causes our brain to not work and function properly, but it also messes with, the cortisol can't regulate our blood sugar production, so it messes with the part of our brain that deals with memory. It also causes or disrupts the synapses in our brain, and this causes our brain to shrink and also our brain cells to die. And this is very crucial because the brain or the synapses being disrupted causes us to lose our ability or social aspect. So we don't want to be social anymore, but we're also avoidant to social interactions, so we become more introverts and we don't want to deal with people. It also shrinks the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain at the very front, and it deals with memory and also our learning ability. In the 2016 article, The Mind and Mental Health, How Stress Affects the Brain, by Rebecca Bernstein, it states that cortisol is believed to create a domino effect that hardwires pathways between the hippocampus and the amygdala in a way that creates a vicious cycle by creating a brain predisposed to a constant fight or flight. So this means our brain is always in the constant fight or flight stage. So we have chronic stress, which causes us to our memory and our learning to be affected. We also know that stress not only affects us physically, mentally, but also biologically. When I say biologically, I'm talking about our cells. So it affects our cell, stress affects our cell structure. So what I mean by this is it affects our actual DNA and our composition of our cells. So when we stress, it affects our mitochondria, or the powerhouse of our cell. It can actually cause it to weaken and die, which leaks out DNA. So our cells can also die because when we stress, our blood or our temperature increases, and this causes our cells to break open, or our mitochondria to break open, and the DNA can intertwine and get tangled and then break, and then our cell dies. Or it can cause it to get all tangled up, and if it doesn't go back to normal, that causes the cells to either die or they commit suicide or apoptosis, so that it doesn't kill all the other healthy cells. It can also shorten our life, and this is done because on the end of our DNA we have these things called telomeres. You can actually shorten our telomeres. Telomeres are these little orange things on the end of our cells, our DNA, and they're the protective covering. And as we stress, it actually shortens them because they naturally shorten after every cell division, but they also replenish themselves because of a hormone called telomerase. According to the 2014 journal How Chronic Stresses Harm Our DNA, Stacy Liu states chronic stress and cortisol exposure decreases your supply, meaning telomeres. When telomeres is too diminished, these cells often die or become pre-inflammatory. This sets aging process into motion along with the associated health risks. We also know that we can become addicted to stress because with anything, we can become addicted to it. And as we become addicted to stress, or we stress more, our body, it gets used to that, and then we crave more and more and more. This can also be very harmful because then our body will find something to stress about even when we're not stressing because it craves that stressor. So we know that everybody is affected by stress in one way or another. We know that people are affected by stress physically because we can feel it, we can see it, and there's a lot of research done on it. But as more research is coming out, we also know that we are affected by stress mentally and biologically. But this is okay because we know that we can combat this by having a high self-efficiency, and we also know that it is okay to stress. We also know that we can take a deep breath and breathe out, and that everybody stresses and that everything will be okay. So remember, take a deep breath. Thank you.